ಹಂಗೆ ಒಬ್ರೊಬ್ರನ್ನೇ ಕರೆಯಲ್ವಲ್ಲ, ಮುಂಚೆನೇ ಕೂಡಿಸ್ಬಿಡಿ. ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ ಹಾಂ, ಮುಂಚೆನೇ ಕೂಡಿಸ್ಬಿಡಿ. ಪ್ರಹ್ಲಾದ್, ಪ್ರವೀಣ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಪ್ರತೀಕ್ ಇವರು. ನಾನು ಬರೀ ನಿಮ್ಮೂರನ್ನೇ ನೋಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ಮಾತಾಡೋದು. ಇನ್ನೂ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ತಗೋದು. ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು. ಹ್ಞೂ.
Can you hear us?
ಗೆಸ್ಟ್ಗಳನ್ನ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಈಚೆ ಮೇಲೆ ಕೊಡಿಸ್ಬೇಕು. ಗೆಸ್ಟ್ಗಳನ್ನ ಈ ಕಡೆ ಸೇರಬೇಕು.
10 second ಡಿಲೇ ಇರ್ತದೆ ಅಲ್ಲಿ
ಅಲ್ವಾ? ಸೀತಾರಾಮ್ಗೆ
line is on. manages strategic relations in Infosys. So Praveen, welcome to the stage. Please have your seat. Thank you. And with our Scrum Connect, which is our proud Kannadiga company, I would say, we have apologies from the CEO of Scrum Connect, Mr. Praveen Karadigudi. He can't make it because of half term and all other activities. So we have COO, Mr. Prahlad Koti, with us. So Prahlad, please welcome on the stage. Um, and of course, once again, welcome you all to this wonderful afternoon, I would say. We had planned this for a long time to have a first ever meet. And, before I dwell into what we want to do in KPEG, I would like to go through about the KannadigaruUK, which is an organization promoting Kannada across United Kingdom for the last 20 years. I think this is 2023, but 24, it marks the 20th anniversary of KannadigaruUK. As a KannadigaruUK, it started with a few techies, I would say, people who came to London for better life, and of course there is a big Kannada organization called Kannada Balaga UK, which is there for last 40 years, um, but they are based in various part of north part of England. So few individuals got together and started Kannadigaru UK. We have Arun, who is also been there for a long time. Arun, welcome. And also, like with few individuals, it started. Now we are celebrating 20th year, which is a very significant milestone because as a proud Kannadiga, an organization going through 20 years is a big thing. So we have number of events planned this year, and also as you could see, first of all, we started to promote Kannada as a language and culture in United Kingdom. Uh, at the moment, we have around 5,000 plus subscribers. When I say subscribers, they're all like, we can reach up to 5,000 Kannadigas in UK, across UK, and some part of Europe as well. We got 150 annual members. We also had life members. So we had 300 life members, but that was when we started. So now what we realized is like, being an annual member is important for us to survive for next 10 years. So we started this annual membership scheme last year, and we got like already 150 plus enrolled as an annual member. So we got like annual full member and associate member, and also what we call student members. So student members also part of the annual membership group. Last year, 2023, as part of just the programs and everything that we host, we spent around 25K UK pounds. That's again from Kannadigas, they come and buy the tickets and, attend the events. So which is, previous year, 2022, we has hosted a mega concert where we had 1,000 plus Kannadigas. So almost like 60, 70K turnover in terms of, size of, revenue and, spend. Uh, in terms of our objectives, promoting language is the key thing. And then we are focused on membership this year. We are proud to teach Kannada as a language for next generation, because today, if you see, languages like Kannada needs the most attention outside India. Even in Karnataka, we have very less people taking language Kannada as their first language. There is always there's always a protest things like happening, of course, like save Kannada as a language. So here we are just making sure that our next generation is continuing to speak Kannada. So that's why the Kannada Kali as a initiative was started by KannadigaruUK in last 15 years back. And today we have 180 plus children learning Kannada. And then we have like 300 plus parents supporting it. We charge £2 per class, but it's worth it. We have a proper setup with Kannada Academy, which is based in USA. We have Ashwin, who is heading the Kannada language, initiative in KannadigaruUK, and he is also sits within the global Kannada Academy committee, academics committee. And we have people who are very passionate, like people who are teaching Kannada. For instance, we have Noorjahan, who is teaching Kannada, and Veena was also teaching earlier. So I think we have a bunch of almost like 50 Kannada Kali teachers, teachers who are teaching and training kids. which is very proud thing for us. And then we have admin team of 10 people who are managing the Kannadakali classes and everything. So it's a very mini in UK we call it as not a regular school, but something where a community run schools. So it's been listed in the Basingstoke language schools, like KannadigaruUK has been listed. So one of the thing why I want everyone to take away today is, like, we are Kannadigas, we are one. In UK we are existing in multiple forms, because everyone has got their own way to connect. So there are pockets of Kannada organization groups everywhere. But one thing we want to do is Kannada Bhavana in UK, which is like a place where everyone can come and have your own building type of thing. So that's a long term kind of objective for KannadigaruUK. I believe the KPEG group can play a very catalyst role in building a Kannada Bhavana in UK. When I say build, we can buy it as well, but end of the day it needs everyone's effort. So I was hearing this for a long time, like last 10 years we were debating about it. But if we all come together and we have a very right minded people, especially the business community, people who are entrepreneurs, people who are professionals, come together, and we can definitely build our own building or buy our own building and do a lot of things for the community. So that's one of the thing we are focused on as our mission. We want to kind of have our own Kannada Bhavana in UK. And it's not a massive thing. If time comes, we all come together, and today is the day which we can take away some of the points, and that's what we want to achieve. Next slide. So we just want to go, like, we also focus on sports clubs. So we have our own sport club, and of course well-being and all those things are very important in this community. So last year we had up to date, like, we have 150 plus sports club members. So we hosted sports day in 2023. We hosted a autumn cricket league which was very colorful. We had live streaming of matches, and the, like, IPL type of tournament we hosted. This year we are hosting summer cricket league in June 2024. So it's been played by more than 60 players across UK, mainly the Kannadigas. So that's one of the proud thing to say about sports club. And we continue to do all those things. And then KPEG, like KPEG is the initiative we started last year, where when Paul Scully, the then Minister of Technology, he came as a guest for one of the event right next door here. So we inaugurated KPEG, and it's a brainchild of course, Praveen, the CEO of Scrum Connect. He and me spoke together, and with KUK pitching in, we started something called uh, KUK Professional and Entrepreneurs Group. So we have a combination of many students, professionals, non-professionals, and the entrepreneurs together. This this group will help us to do more of networking and professional development. At the same time, we want to do more events like this, where interested people can come here and share their ideas. Uh, Also, there is a startup and mentoring session happening. Prahlad has been involved in the mentoring sessions from Scrum Connect. Scrum Connect has already committed, if somebody wants to start their startup, they are going to give all the supports, and also with the space to conduct your business. So that's another thing which Praveen and team have announced. So there's a lot of opportunity for us as a KPEG. And when it comes to our goal, as I said, like, it should help the community. At the same time, it should help the community and self development as a businessman, or or an entrepreneur. So yeah, we got mentors, as I said, like Praveen Karadigudi, who is the CEO of Scrum Connect. Prahlad is here, CEO, and also Shilpa, she is the CFO. And again, these are mentors we started with. There's no reason for others to invite as mentors as well. So today, again, somebody wants to come forward and help with certain things, more than welcome. So yeah, that's at the end. I just want to start this whole event by saying, like, we got number of events coming up. We got this musical concert in London, which is done with Akshay Patra Foundation, 23rd of March. It's during the holy time. We got, like, Yugadi, which is a very big festival for Kannadigas, on April 13 in Harrow, and then the Summer Cricket League, and then there are a number of other events planned. So thank you, and again welcome you all, and we got some wonderful interaction lined up. So over to you, Deepa.
Thank you, Gana.
Just
Now I would like to give a brief introduction our distinguished chief guest, Mr. Praveen Gonabal, whose professional journey is characterized by wealth of experience and a diverse skill set. Currently contributing significantly to Infosys UK in the energy sector, Praveen's career is marked by achievements in product development, consulting, and business development across multiple sectors. Praveen earned his BTech from the prestigious NIT Calicut, laying a strong foundation in engineering. He further honed his managerial skills by completing a postgraduate program in management from the renowned ISB Hyderabad, showcasing a commitment to continuous learning and professional growth. With close to 25 years of professional experience, Praveen has navigated through various industries, including telecom, banking, and energy. The diverse exposure underscores his adaptability and versatility, proving his ability to excel in different business domains. His current role at Infosys UK, particularly in the energy sector, reflects not only his technical prowess but also his strategic acumen in understanding and addressing the complexities of the industry. Please join me in extending a warm welcome to our distinguished chief guest, Praveen Gonabal.
Can you hear me? Thank you, Gana. Thank you, Deepa. Okay. All right. Is it low on power? Okay. Do you have a clicker?
While Praveen giving presentation, anybody have questions, please feel free to take some sticky notes and write your questions and stick it over there for the lean coffee session. So you're free to have the sticky notes.
Can I use that table by any chance? Might be easier. I mean, unless you have a clicker. I'll move it. So this is a conversation that I've been having in different forums to audiences of different technology understanding. So this is not really deep into technology, but it's really more about how to make sense of disruptive technologies, which we're currently all immersed in. So you don't really need to have a technology background to be able to understand it. The objective of this is to how to make sense of disruptive technologies or technologies in general and see where the opportunities might lie. Feel free to stop me along the way. I mean, happy to take questions as we go through this. So you've probably seen and heard this kind of a comment. Apparently, the Chinese word for crisis is a combination of danger and opportunity. So it turns out this is BS, right? It's not really the case, but this is one of those urban legends which kind of becomes very popular. So just someone quotes this somewhere and then it becomes very popular and then everyone else reiterates the same thing. It's not really the case. This is not really the case, but the idea is very intriguing. In every disruption, every crisis, there is always the seed of an opportunity, and I think that's the constructive way to look at any change or any pivot that you're faced with, right? So even when it comes to disruptive technology, so this is true. So all kinds of disruptions that we see and face even in our own lives or in business. So there is a seed of an opportunity there. So as long as we know how to approach the situation that we're faced with, or the technology or the disruption that we are looking at. So if you know how to analyze the situation in the right perspective, you will always be able to identify at least some opportunities there that you can then capitalize on. So let's take half a step back to figure out how to begin looking at this, right? So how do you typically win a game? Any game, right? It doesn't have to be a particular sport or a particular game. So how does one typically win a game? So any thoughts?
Have a strategy for that.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Dedication.
Dedication, yes. Creativity, yes. Skills. What else?
Positive mindset.
Proper strategy. One more.
Positive mindset.
Positive mindset. So, rules of the game. Yeah, I think that's a good one. Awareness of the goal. Yeah. Say that again. Ethical play. Yeah, I think, see, there's all of the, sorry, go ahead, please. Perseverance. Yeah, I think that's a good one. So there's three broad, I mean, all of these are great ones, right? So there's no, obviously, there's no one ingredient that will make for success in any game or in any endeavor for that matter. So there's, all of these are right. So, but there's three broad ways into which you can categorize these things, right? Like consultants like to say there's the mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive. I don't know if this is a collectively exhaustive way of looking at things, but there's typically three ways. If you look at when India wins or loses a cricket match, right? So typically the commentary at the end of the day, or when the captain actually he's interviewed on TV, sometimes depending on whether they win or lose, they usually say the stronger team won, right? So one way to win any game is by being the stronger player. Secondly, you can win a game by playing the game better. And this is distinct from being a good player, right? So you can be a good player and now have a bad day. You could play a game poorly on a particular day, despite the fact that you're technically a good player. The third one is by changing the game, right? So, and this is when it comes to the question of disruption. So it's all these three things, right? So there's even when it comes to the business world, you see companies that succeed because of their strategy. Someone spoke about innovation. Someone spoke about the strategy. There's companies that succeed because of the strategy that they adopt. There's companies that succeed because of the capabilities that they have, the capabilities that they build, the capabilities that they acquire over time. And there are companies which succeed by either changing the game, or in many cases, the game changes, right? So you might not have done something. So it's very unusual that people or companies have so much heft, so much power that they can change the game all by themselves. I mean, there are times when that happens, and typically it's a monopoly situation, right? So if you think about it from a business structure or a market structure perspective, it's usually the monopoly companies which manage to change the game to their advantage from time to time. And every now and then there are companies that emerge which seem to have a quasi-monopolistic capability or a quasi-monopolistic power. Microsoft today is a very good example, or Amazon for that matter. Amazon is a pretty good example as well. It sometimes feels that they make the weather. It's their world and we're all living in it, right? But every so often, regardless of where you stand in the pecking order, the game itself changes. So, and every time the game changes, it could be because of some kind of a technology change, it could be because of a business change. It presents an opportunity, especially. So let's look at what anyone know who this is? This is Otto von Bismarck, is the Sardar Patel of Germany. Like I like to call him the Sardar Patel of Germany. So he was called the Iron Chancellor. So he is the person who actually unified in the 1800s. He unified Germany. Germany from being a confederation of many small princely states. He's the person who brought everything together and created a unified Germany. And then it resulted in a whole bunch of changes in how history evolved. But what Otto von Bismarck's comment, right? So this comment that he's made about how much power statesmen typically have, whether it's a politician or whether it's an emperor or any sort of a business leader, how much power do these people typically have, right? So it's like, and it's a very humbling comment, and it speaks to me. This particular quote, I don't know when I heard this, but over the decades, over the years, this speaks to me quite a bit, because it kind of brings together a combination of circumstance and individual agency, right? So what he says is, regardless of how powerful a particular statesman is, and he was very powerful in his own days, right? So like maybe a Mohammed bin Salman in Saudi Arabia today, or a Modi in India, or a President Xi Jinping in China today. So they're all very powerful in their own right. But regardless of how powerful a statesman is or how powerful a business leader is, all anyone can really do when it comes to really changing the course of history is just pay attention to what's happening in the world. Pay attention to the footsteps of God, as he calls it, marching through history, because there are forces that are much bigger than any one of us, right? So much bigger than any one company, or much bigger than any one individual. And then just hang on to the coattails of God as he passes by, and then hopefully you basically ride the trend. That's essentially what Otto von Bismarck here is saying. So when we talked about the game itself changing, right? So that you may not be able to engineer a change in the game, but when the game changes by itself for whatever reason, and it might be due to factors completely unanticipated or factors completely outside of control. What we all need to look at is how can I play this new game in a manner that can give me a better outcome. So I got news for you. The clock speed of our world. Who understands the term clock speed? Yeah, so we have some engineers here. Clock speed is really the tick of a microprocessor, right? It's really how quickly business happens. It really how like people understand it from a biological perspective. It's the metabolism, the metabolic rate, right? So what might have happened? What might have taken many months or many years? So you want to organize a function like this, Ganavare. So this might have taken many. The kind of effort that it would have taken before we had digital technology, before we had WhatsApp, before we had social media. Just imagine writing letters to book a venue like this, writing letters to, or cyclostyling. You remember, anyone remember cyclostyle? Yeah, cyclostyling announcements about KPEG, and then going to a DTP shop to get a invitation printed, then actually mailing it across to maybe a library somewhere and getting it posted somewhere on the library notice board. Unthinkable, right? And you can organize events like this and have better outcomes, better turnout, better participation, all of those things through digital technology. And you can do that in a matter of a few days. You can pull together an event like this maybe in a few days, which might have taken months in the past, right? And you might not have had the same kind of let's say user experience as we call it these days. So the clock speed of the world is changing. Things are becoming much faster, and we've all noticed this in our own daily lives, right? So it almost feels like it's increasing on a daily basis. So is that a good or a bad thing? So what do you guys think? I mean, from a personal perspective, we all have our own sense for, okay, this is too much stress or this is exciting. What do you feel? I mean, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Bad. I would say bad.
Holding on to the right coattail, it's a good thing.
All right, there you go. I mean, good way to connect it to Bismarck's quote, but yeah, that's an interesting perspective. So, any other thoughts? Yeah, I think that's a good way of looking at it, right? So, Pratik, Prahlad, any thoughts on this?
I think for me, it's the rules of the game are changing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right, it's just what it is, right? It is what it is. Yeah. Pratik? Right, right. Yeah, and I think that's the nuanced answer, right? So it's really when it comes to any change for that matter, right? Whether it's the clock speed of the world increasing, like I'm saying here, or any change for that matter, anything that's truly important. It's called the consultant's answer. It depends, right? So see, someone there mentioned that, right? So it's the infamous consultant's answer, never really saying what it is. But I mean, that is the answer is infamous, but also a very appropriate answer in many circumstances. That's the reason consultants use it a lot, because there is, like Pratik was saying, there is a degree of nuance required for many of these questions. So my own perspective on this, right, is the increasing speed of the clock speed of the world, right? It depends whether it's a good or a bad thing, depends on and tying it back to the conversation that we're having about identifying opportunities and disruptive technologies. I think it really matters on whether you're an incumbent that's really not paid the attention to the approaching footsteps of God, like Bismarck said. If you've not been paying attention to what's been happening around you, and you're kind of milking monopoly profits just because you happen to have a particular control of a particular technology or a control of a particular, like in the old license permit days in India, right? So, I mean, I'm a child of the 70s and 80s. I know I don't look the age, but when I was when I first started working, like the party like it's 1999 was very much a thing. So that gives you a sense for how old I might be. But in the 70s and 80s, the license permit Raj in India was a big thing. Anyone remember applying for a telephone in India and waiting for years to get a telephone connection? Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyone has anyone had a Bajaj scooter at home?
Yeah.
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 How many years did you wait for a Bajaj scooter? I mean, my dad had a Bajaj Cub at home. Like when I was growing up, right? My dad had a Bajaj Cub, and he had to wait for literally 5 years. I mean, who waits for 5 years for anything anymore these days, right? And the reason it was that used to happen was this was pre-liberalization India, and Rahul Bajaj and the Bajaj family. I mean, great engineers, I presume, but they had a stranglehold on two-wheeler manufacture in India, right? So there's hardly any competition to them. So if you're and not to unnecessarily drag the Bajaj house into the question here, but it was a monopoly at that time, right? So for better or for worse, but it was a monopoly for various reasons. And if you're an incumbent who's not really been paying attention to, in that case, if you've not had some sense that one day liberalization might arrive and I might have to compete with, say, Honda or Piaggio or whoever, so then it's a bad thing for you. The fact that the clock speed of the world is increasing, every time the clock ticks, it's like a new hand is being dealt in a game of cards. And with every new hand, you have new opportunities. You might have a bad hand now, but the next time the deck is shuffled and you get the new hand, you might have all aces, right? So the clock speed of the clock speed increasing, it's a bad thing if you're an incumbent who is who's sitting happy and pretty with whatever assets you have under your control and you're milking monopoly profit. It's a great thing if you're not an incumbent, if you have the ability, if you have the energy, if you have the creativity to make the most of whatever new circumstances you find yourself in, and then see what you can do with those, right? So it is a bit of a it depends thing, but not every change, right? Not every change. We've been talking about disruptive technology and disruption. Not every disruption is technologically driven, and not every technology is a disruptive technology. So there can be other sorts of disruption, right? It's a bit of a truism. I mean, disruption stuff happens in life, right? I mean, this is disruption. I mean, this is disruption as well, right? Anyone knows what this is?
Denormalization.
Exactly. Yeah. Demonetization. And I mean, who knew? I mean, people say a lot of people knew, but I mean, these are things that you can't really plan for these things. I mean, one day at 8 p.m., Modi can come on the television and say, Mitro, from now on, something else will happen, right? I mean, you can't plan for these things. But from every one of these crises, I mean, like that whole that urban legend about crisis and opportunity. Every one of these things, right? I mean, it's obviously disruptive for a lot of people. Brexit was disruptive for a whole bunch of sectors in the UK, but it was a massive opportunity for sectors in, say, Paris, like financial centers in Paris and Frankfurt. So, it was a big opportunity for for individuals, for businesses, for entire countries, right? So this one, let's not dwell too much into who gained from this, but I mean, Paytm. I mean, we've been listening and hearing about Paytm quite a bit in the news these days about another crisis that they are going through. But who knows what seeds of opportunity this particular present crisis might have for Paytm or for other people, right? But Paytm was very much a child of demonetization. I mean, there was Paytm before. Paytm was kind of limping along. I mean, Vijay Shekhar Sharma, who's the founder and CEO of Paytm, like the business it wasn't doing too badly. But the hockey stick, as they call it, the hockey stick point in the growth of Paytm was really demonetization. Without demonetization, and it's not like, to our point earlier, it's not something that Vijay Shekhar Sharma or anyone in the Paytm board could have engineered. I mean, they couldn't really talk to Modi and say, can you please do demonetization? Right? There are much bigger forces outside of our control. So, but technology, I mean, while disruption is not equal to technology and technology is not equal to disruption, technology can often provide you the keys to be able to make the most of the situations that you do find yourself in, right? So how do you do this? So with any disruption or any disruptive technology or disruption in general, any change for that matter, there is a few aspects, a few perspectives to take, a few approaches to thinking. What changes with this disruption, right? So when it comes to a demonetization, so the obvious things are obviously money is no longer going to be used, but there's always the second order and third order effects which are not immediately obvious. So you need to start thinking, okay, does that mean that cash transportation is no longer a business? Does that mean that change is no longer a consideration? You don't have to worry about change anymore because digital currency is what people are going to use. I heard a very interesting statistic. Do you know Candyman? Anyone aware of Candyman as a brand in India? I mean, you all been living here, but Candyman is the brand of toffees that I believe it's ITC. Right? So, do you know the connection between demonetization and Candyman? Some of you might have guessed this. So, Candyman's sales apparently went down drastically after demonetization. Can you guess why? Change, yeah. I mean, like every time you had a 50p change due from someone, I mean, Candyman was probably used less for eating and more for change, right? So every time you had 50p due from the shopkeeper, they used to give a Candyman sachet and then like off you went, right? So that's how you see the business went down drastically. So these are the second and third order unanticipated changes that you sometimes you can't even think about. You can't predict these things. So another perspective to take, right? Another lens to look at this from, who becomes vulnerable. So again, this is not immediately obvious. Sometimes you have to dig deeper. Sometimes you have to think harder to see who becomes vulnerable from a particular change. And one way of looking at, one way of identifying who becomes more vulnerable is who's been having a good all this while, like the Bajaj scooter company, right? So once liberalization happens, okay, more scooters coming in, so Bajaj is going to have it tougher from now on, right? So who's been making, like we discussed earlier, monopoly profits, oversized profits. So that's always a good marker of who's going to be impacted, and therefore where the opportunities might lie for, right? And then what's been something that we dread? For example, going to the before digital technology came in, right? Like when I was I was a school kid, I remember going and paying a KEB bill. Do you guys remember that? Going and standing in queue, and there used to be a guy sitting in a cage with like his cash box, and like he used to like stamp those things and give. Paying a KEB bill used to be like a 2-hour job for me, right? Like I used when I was in high school, I used to actually go to a KEB office and then used to do this. Now it takes you 10 seconds, if that much, right? Like maybe not even direct debit, and you're done. You don't even realize that it's happened. So things that you dread are always a good indicator for where the opportunities might lie. What becomes possible, right? So if you just think about touch screen, think about miniaturized components, think about GPSs. All of these individual components were available before, but what a genius like Steve Jobs managed to do is he looked at all of these things in isolation, and then he looked at all of these things and said, what becomes possible because now we have a miniaturized high resolution touch screen, right? The iPhone becomes possible or an iPad becomes possible because these things, these components are now in place, right? So that's another perspective to take. What becomes possible because the capabilities or the individual ingredients are now available. So for example, what becomes possible when everyone has a location tracker on them, right? I mean, if you think of everyone buying a location tracker, that's never going to happen. But now that you have a smartphone that has a location tracker, you have this infrastructure that everyone has. What becomes possible when everyone has a camera in their pocket, right? So location tracking, Uber would never have been possible unless we were all carrying this kind of a location tracker in our pockets. So the person who came up with Uber, like Travis Kalanick, so he identified that, okay, now we're all trackable. So not only are buyers trackable, not only are the taxi takers trackable, but also the taxi providers trackable, right? So this is another way of looking at it. So we need to think using these lenses. So we need to think from the left brain, the so-called left brain and the right brain approaches. Again, the left brain, right brain thing has been debunked as well. But the urban legend again is that the left brain thinking is logical, analytical, quantitative, and all of that, right? So many of these questions that we were looking at before, so they're both, some of them are left brain, some of them are right brain, some of them need dual perspective. So specifically about the iPhone, I feel that the iPhone, I mean, my personal take on the iPhone is that it's a hybrid between analytical and creative thinking. I call this bingo thinking, right? I'm convinced that Steve Jobs had an image, had a vision of the iPhone in mind, and he was just waiting for the right components to become commercially feasible, technically available, right? And then when the last component fell in place, he said, okay, now is the moment that I can actually finally create the iPhone. So that's how it happened. So, but all of this sounds really vague, right? I mean, it's all very good to have a bunch of lenses with which to look at this, but it's not really a. I mean, can you give me a checklist for how to think about disruptive technology or how to think about change, so I can finally go and invent something, right? So it's not that easy. I mean, but again, thinking is hard, right? So what can we do to make this a little bit of a more of a structured process or a repeatable process? So that's where a lot of the toolkits and concepts come in mind, come to that can help. So we need to understand business models, right? So these are all vague terms, these are all quite popular terms, but you need to understand the business model not only of a particular industry, but the business model of the business that you are trying to target. So if you have a business idea in mind, understand the business model of the industry that you're trying to address, and without really having the intuitive understanding of the business model that you're trying to really disrupt, you'll never really be able to capitalize on the opportunities that you're facing. You need to understand industry attractiveness. So the good thing is that there are frameworks for each of these things. For example, for the business models, who's heard of the business model canvas? Hopefully some of you have heard of it. There you go. So the business model canvas is a very structured approach to understanding the business model of a particular sector, right? So that's one. We can get into a little bit more detail, but there's a lot of material available online So if you heard the vague term business models being bandied about, it's a very powerful concept. But rather than having to do a PhD in understanding businesses, you can actually take the business model canvas. It's a very easily accessible tool, and you can analyze any industry, and you can probably get a pre-filled business model canvas for any industry that you're looking for. So there's when it comes to industry attractiveness, there's other tools as well, like Porter's 5 forces. You've probably all heard of Porter's 5 forces, right? Or most of you must have heard of Porter's 5 forces. There's many frameworks like this that are structured, that are proven, and there's a lot of resources available as well. So, but it's not it's an iterative process. You can't just rely on frameworks. You can't just rely on first principles thinking based on the questions that I was identifying before. It has to be an iterative process. You have to start with the questions, use the framework, and then based on the frameworks, whatever insights that you gather, go back to the questions again and apply those lenses. So it's an iterative process, but there is tremendous opportunity every time there is something that changes, and we all owe it to ourselves and to the world to figure out how best to navigate these changes. Any questions? Right.
Yeah, basically like the disruptions obviously happen like in a normal day, right? But how we will keep up to date, like what a disruption is going to come, or like what is happening now, is any specific websites or any information we know?
No, very good question. See, I keep asking this question to people. I mean, I talk to a lot of technology people, business people, and there's no one answer to this, right? It's a kind of an it depends. But being plugged into multiple ecosystems. So there's a concept of weak links. So it's one thing to have a lot of very good friends, but it's important, like probably Gana or a lot of the leadership within the KUK, right? It's important to be connected into multiple ecosystems. So you know what's happening in any particular industry, any particular business. So you may not know the ins and outs of a particular industry or a particular technology, but you know just enough to be able to sense that, okay, there is something exciting happening here. How can I combine this plus that plus that? What becomes possible? The concept of what becomes possible. You'll only be able to figure that out when you have access to multiple sources of data, right? So wide reading, wide network, weak ties more important than strong ties. I think that those are some of the things that I've found it useful for myself, and what I hear repeatedly offered as answers to this question.
Thank you.
Yeah, pleasure.
Anyone has got USB-C charger?
Thank you, Praveen. Our next distinguished guest, Prahlad's professional journey is nothing short of impressive. Graduating in computer science from Davangere laid the foundation for a career marked with continual growth and leadership. His global perspective expanded when he moved to UK in 1995, setting the stage for a transformative phase in his professional life. The pursuit of excellence led him to the esteemed London Business School, where he successfully completed his MBA, adding a strategic dimension to his technical acumen. Armed with a strong educational background, Prahlad ventured into leadership that would define his legacy in the tech industry. With an extensive career spanning over 30 years, Prahlad has been a guiding force in companies like Mastech and Netcompany. His leadership acumen is reflected in his ability to spearhead ventures within the corporate landscape. Notably, he has played pivotal roles in opening new markets for IT services, showcasing his foresight and strategic thinking. Prahlad's impact extends beyond the conventional as he has proven his mettle in integrating complex businesses. This skill often requiring a delicate balance of vision, execution, and underscores his ability to navigate challenges and create synergies within the corporate ecosystem. In essence, Prahlad's journey stands as a testament to his unwavering commitment to excellence, his knack for identifying and seizing opportunities, and his proficiency in steering organizations through dynamic landscapes. His legacy is not just in the positions held, but in the transformative mark he has left on the ventures he has undertaken. As we acknowledge Prahlad's illustrious career, we are inspired by the depth of his contributions to the tech industry and look forward to witnessing the continued impact to his leadership in the years to come. Please join me in extending a warm welcome to our distinguished guest, Mr. Prahlad Koti.
Thanks for a brilliant introduction. I never thought I would say that about myself. Really pleased to be here. I'm going to be sharing some experience about taking a business which is established, but not fully established or large, and then how you actually scale it. This is my experience. It's not like a template or an answer that you can just take it and implement anywhere, but it's more a learning. And I think you will find that there are things here which you may apply at any stage in your kind of venture, whether it's a startup, whether you're taking something small and making it big, or whether it's something big and you're actually going to make it any bigger. Everyone recognizes this? Yeah, Everest? Yeah? Okay, all right. So this is from the side of Nepal. So there are kind of two routes. So there's a base camp. So you go up, one is the West Ridge, or the most common one is the South Col route. So that's where probably around 75% of the people actually climb. The really interesting thing is, there is here, I mean, it's probably not very visible, but here is a glacier called as Khumbu Icefall. So there are probably, why that is very challenging area is that it's about 1.5, 2 miles of glacier, lots of ice, lots of moving ice, sudden crevasses where someone could slip and fall, and more than 2/3 of failures of people who come to the base camp and who don't actually climb actually happens at this particular icefall or this particular glacier. I thought it's a kind of a really good parallel to a startup. So if you think about base camp as where a startup is established, so only about, so 25% of the startups fail in the first year. So you start off, you do something and it fails. So 75% get to the base camp. Of that, 63% of the 75 fail to actually scale. And then, of course, some scale and then they don't really succeed. Only about 10% really succeed. So if you're starting a new business venture, your likelihood of success is around 10%. Yeah? And this is one of the biggest places where organizations established, you've got customers, you've proven it, whether it's a product or whether it's a service, but then you actually fail to scale. And that's a kind of a really sad thing because you actually have something to offer as a value proposition. You're creating value for your customers, your clients, and then you don't actually scale. Yeah? So let me share some of my thoughts in terms of what you do in terms of scaling. But there's one thing which we should be clear about. There's a difference between growing a business and scaling a business. So think about if you have 100 pounds, you put it in a bank, it's 10% interest. So next year you have 110. You put that again in the bank, that becomes 121, and so on. So that's kind of growth. So instead of 100, you could put 1,000. Okay, and if you put it in 1,000, then you will get 1,100 and so on. Yeah, but that's just a bigger size, but that's growing. Scaling is about, I put 100 pounds, next year I get 110. For the following year, instead of getting 121, I get 150 or 180. So this is typically where, again, if you think about playing it safe or playing it with a bit of risk, putting it into money into a safe account versus going and investing into a share. And when you actually start a business, then effectively you're taking a huge amount of risk. Yeah, but the payback can be quite high. But you have to think about scaling, not just growing. So growth is important. Scaling secures the business for the future because you increase disproportionately the growth at which you are achieving, the speed at which you are achieving the growth, but you also disproportionately increase the profits that you make, and that can actually be used kind of in a very constructive way to actually grow your business even faster. Yeah? So it's really important to actually distinguish and not just look at growth. The other phrase that gets used is the kind of the quality of the business, and typically it means for every pound that you're investing, what's the return you get. And some of you are from finance background, so you have variety of measures to measure that particular thing in a very numerical way. But really, it's important that you think about it as scaling, which is about improving the quality of the business that you're building. So when you're scaling, so what are the things that you're looking for? So I will go through each one of them, one by one, just kind of give you a sense. And this is my experience. The first thing is to think about that when you're actually a entrepreneur who is starting a business or who has started a business, so typically all the decisions are made by yourself, and there's no one else, and you don't have to rely on anyone. Yeah, but it's a great thing because you're in absolute control, but it's also a limiting factor because there's only so many decisions a person can make at any point in time. Yeah, and all of us, our quality of decisions change or become worse when we are tired. It's really good when you are fresh, when you have all the facts. You could have a simple thing. You might be driving in traffic and you're frustrated and you come and you have to make a decision, then the quality of the decision will be suspect. Yeah. So it's really important for you to think, if you want to scale a business, that you actually have to have a very strong, capable team that you trust. And that really is important. And in fact, I would say in the long term, for any entrepreneur, the most important and sometimes the only thing that they have to do is to actually build a very strong team around them, because you don't have to actually do that much. But I said that much, but building the team is probably the hardest. The second thing to look at is you're successful with a few customers, your product is being used, they find it valuable. The question then is, you're now wanting, let's say, a larger deal or more customers, so you're much more in the limelight, so you are going to face more competition. So this is also the time to invest in what you're offering. So the product itself needs to be sharper. So this is the time to say, actually, I want to make it big. And if you don't really invest and make the product sharper, then it will be one of the businesses that fails to make beyond, the first camp. The third one, which is kind of very obvious, is about standardization of what you're doing. So there are any number of decisions that you're going to be making. And as you delegate, you need a mechanism by which you're not reliant entirely on a kind of a mechanical process. So try and see if you can automate. If you can automatically make decisions, that actually helps you. If you're processing things, it's really important that you actually do that. So think about systems that will support your business right up front. So things like an invoicing system, a financial system. So previously it may be easier to get a piece of paper, pass it, send an email, etc. But if you want to scale a business, it needs to be in a system that someone can look at it, automatically sign it. And that's really important, that you have to create a process by which it happens. And you can go back and then look at it. And rather than look at, I need to check everything, but you've got to take a different mindset view, which is you actually look at it as you, on an exceptional basis, you're actually intervening. But most of the things that you're doing actually flow through. Again, it's kind of very obvious. One of my learnings was that you have to invest in this sales effort that you're doing. Again, and as an entrepreneur, your number one job is probably to sell what you have to offer, your product or your service, and you're doing that all the time. Again, you do not want to be the limiting factor. If you want to take a, go on a holiday for 2 weeks, then suddenly the business cannot stop. So the business has to continue beyond you, which means that you have to invest in the team that's going to run. And here, I'm not going to suggest that you need to hire Salesforce or you don't want to hire Salesforce. That's a kind of a question about the type of organization that you want to build. But what you have to do is to think of yourself as the sales activity should happen, the marketing activity should happen, you have to invest in your brand. Um, but how do you actually do it is a different question. But the fact is, you have to do it. So that's an important element of trying to invest in the sales and marketing beyond yourself. All organizations, I think, live and die by how strong they are in terms of their culture. So what are the values of the organization? How do you actually behave in a particular situation? And even say something like, we have organization here, KUK, which is coming up to 20 years. And that's really not possible without a strong culture. Strong culture doesn't mean that you have to be hard. You can be a very soft culture, but actually a very strong culture. Yeah? So strength is not being hard, or it's not like a Wall Street type of thing. Culture is really about a consistency of behavior across an entire organization. And as you scale, it becomes harder for you to actually implement that culture. And this is where it's really important you have a strong network. So we already talked about, from an external perspective, to have a strong network, because you are then tapped into different things that actually help you to shape your own thinking and your own organization. It's equally important, in my experience, that you have a very strong network within the organization. Not you personally, that the organization itself is very well networked. What, as an organization you scale, is that if you are, let's say, 50 people, probably everyone is your friend. If you're 150 people, you know everyone intimately. Yeah, you know them well. If there's a big function, you know everyone's birthdays, etc. If you're 1,000 people, you don't know more than half of the people in the organization. And not only that, there are people whom you don't know who are hiring people whom you may not even meet. Yeah. So it's important that you create a strong internal network. And I have worked in very large organizations where you meet, let's say, a CEO, they talk a language and they say, this is what we're trying to do, and this is where the direction of the organization is. You come and talk to a project manager. As far as the CEO is concerned, they are still 4 years behind. So they are still thinking, that's what I'm supposed to do, I am doing this. Whereas the CEO has moved on to a new way of thinking or new way of working, a new strategy, but the people on the ground haven't moved. And that's a kind of a classic case where you have a hierarchical organization. So everything goes from top, it goes to bottom, and it takes time. If it is network, it'll actually move through the organization much faster. And again, if you have 2 node points, then you require 1 connection. If you have 3, then you get 3 node points, and if you have 4, you get 6, and so on. So the network's effect is much, much stronger. And really, that is internal network is really important, because when you want to implement a strong culture in an organization, you cannot do it through hierarchy. It has to be done through a very strong network. Yeah, because you need everyone at every point constantly talking. And there are kind of practical issues. You're working on a particular, let's say, in a IT industry. Sorry, Pratik. Yeah. I think most of the colleagues here are in IT industry. So if you're working on a project and you face a problem, yeah. So one way is to really, talk to your project manager. They go to someone else and they bring an expert and actually solve that. If an organization is well networked, so you already know people from somewhere else who are working on it. And this will usually happen on a serendipitous basis. That's by chance. It's not always that kind of design, but that's the whole point of a network, that there are more chances of things happening serendipitously. So as you grow the organization, think about it. What are the techniques by which you can strengthen the network? So more people in your organization know more people. and you have to create the opportunities for that to flourish. My last point is really around you as a person. So you're an entrepreneur, but then if you want to scale, you have to go through yourself a fundamental change, and everything depends on you. And here, you could be in an entrepreneur group, so 3 of you or 4 of you might be starting a business, but it means for all of them, I just use it interchangeably. But it does impact what you have to do in future, and really you have to change yourself. And unless you're prepared to change, then the organization will not change. And one of the key challenges for an entrepreneur is previously, and I think it's probably thing that people get used to, is that you are not really answerable to anyone. You're only answerable to yourself, yeah, and your own dreams and your own motivations. And suddenly you're in a different space where you are working with people who are not having the same kind of emotional attachment that you have to things, yeah? Because they are an agent and they have a different agency. Yeah? So it's really important for you to change yourself if you want to scale the business. Okay? So this is all nice, and this is about scaling the business. So how do you do it? You write it down. Mostly you write it down, and then yeah. So the idea you have to scale is an idea, and if you want the idea to be a reality, you need to actually do something. And in order to do something, one of my personal kind of good things that has helped me is to actually write down what I want to achieve and then say how I want to achieve it. I'll probably say 99% of the time, it never happens in the way I have written it. It always keeps changing. But the fact that I'm actually writing it and I'm kind of committing it means that I've got a better chance of doing at least some of the things that I'm writing. Not everything, because circumstances change and you have to change. But really, having that discipline, writing it down. So even though you're not answerable to anyone and you're an entrepreneur, so think about actually writing it down. And here I have some kind of, I'll probably say, standard things around a business plan. What does a business plan entail? Probably each one will, we can speak half an hour about it, but I'll just try and give you a sense of it. And this, you can get it from Google search and a business book, etc. But I do feel these become cliche because there's a reason, because it's worked for other people. So one is really to be clear about why you are in business. What is the business trying to achieve? Whether you're trying to improve sustainability, whether you are trying to help people who are underprivileged, whether you are helping high net worth individuals make even more money. I mean, in a way, it doesn't. It matters that you know what it is that you're trying to achieve, and what does that mean for you and for the world. So it's really important that you write that down. The second thing is to say, and this is kind of slightly harder, which is what is it that you're creating as a value? So ultimately, anything that you're offering as a service or as a product, you're trying to create a value for someone else. So for example, if your business is to put paving on the front drive, then it means something for someone, and people are willing to pay so much more money or so much less money. Yeah? So you have to think about what is it that you're offering. And again, as a startup, you don't really spend time on these things. You're looking at, let me get a customer, let me prove it, and you don't really need to write it. But again, if you want to scale a business, then you have to be able to write it so other people can see your passion, they can actually absorb some of it. This kind of really, okay, the customer is willing to part some money, but how are you going to get more customers? Yeah. So sometimes it could be a direct sales model, it could be a distribution model. So again, think about restaurants that have grown within kind of Indian diaspora or outside. You can see different business models that are there, and Praveen spoke about kind of different business models earlier. So think about if you're creating a business. Let's say you want to create a restaurant business. You could say, actually, I'm creating one restaurant. Once it's successful, I'll replicate it in other places. But how do you replicate it? Are you are you going to have so many family members who are going to run it? No, it'll have to be other business partners. So how do they join you? What's the product? How is the product consistent across? Yeah. So some of the biggest chains, food chains, you can see that they have created that standardization, and they have a way of doing it everywhere. And you can even see, I'm not trying to promote anyone, but if you think about Sri Krishna Vada Pav, a good example of how they have created a degree of standardization across. Yeah? So you have to think about, is it a distribution model? But if it's an IT services, again, you're creating more people, you're bringing in more people. So as you acquire more customers, do you have salespeople in your organization, or are you following a consultative model where you go and consult people and then help them, and that's how you sell it? So you got to think about that aspect, but write it down. Yeah, whatever it is, write it down, because it gives you a chance to actually change it. Yeah. The other thing to look at is how you're going to service the customer. So of course, I'm using very blunt terms around structure and supply chain, but what's your customer service model? So how do you keep the customers happy? How much of it you're going to do it yourself? How much you're going to bring from outside? So it's what proportion of that build versus buy, all of that. So write it down. Yeah. And then probably the last two things, so revenue projections and then kind of financials, that the money that you're making. One key aspect here is really, if you're not really careful, as you scale the business, you're going to be investing in sales, you're going to be investing in marketing, you're bringing other people in. Everything costs money. Yeah. So you have to look after your cash, and so you have to be very clear about where the cash is coming, where it is going, and what your funding model is. Yeah. So you have to really phase it. So because you will not have the ability that a large organization has, which is it has lots of money lying around, and it may make a dent in a profit somewhere, but fundamentally they are still solvent. If it says scale up, you spend too much money too soon without the results, then actually you could become insolvent. So kind of look at all of that aspect. But it's really important, write it down. That's my kind of emphasis. And that's what's helped me to scale business, which is to write it down. And you look at it every, sometimes when you're worried, you look at it every day, every week. Sometimes you only look at it once in 3 months. But it gives you a chance to actually reflect what's happened. What did you think you were going to do? One of the foibles we have as humans is we can create stories, and that's our strength, but we can also create stories that give us comfort and actually start telling stories to ourselves that that's what I actually meant. When you write it down, you don't really have that. You can't play games with yourself. Yeah. So you have to be honest. Yeah. Okay. But there's kind of softer aspects for you to look at. Again, I'll come back to the human aspects, which is what's your motivation? Do you want to run this company for 20 years, or you want to run it for 3 years and you want to sell it? Are you comfortable delegating to people? Are you comfortable not being directly involved in every decision? So these are all kind of personal journeys. And kind of lastly, how do you hold yourself accountable? It's really important that you hold yourself accountable, because as an entrepreneur, you do think I don't have to answer to anyone. But really, if you think about it, if you have 150 people working in an organization, you're responsible for livelihood of 150 people. Yeah, and you got to put yourself in a situation where you have to say, I'm accountable for their livelihood, not on a kind of personal level, but really to create the business where they can flourish and thrive. So you have to keep yourself accountable. So, bring in friends who can give you independent challenge and advice. Yeah? You don't always have to take it, but, create a structure that, you invite criticism. So you give permission for other people to criticize you. And that's really important too. As you scale, you cannot operate as you were before. Okay. I do want to really leave you with last couple of things. So one is all of that, I've said to you is all theory. Really, you need to have an action plan, and you got to have an action plan. That's it. I'm sure everyone knows what SMART is, which is you have to be able to measure it. It has to be time bound, and it's got to be a very specific thing that you're committing. And really, to have an action plan, and then stick to that. Every periodic time, every month, every 3 months, review that. And sometimes it's not really right, and so you can change course. Changing course is not the problem, but create the plan that forces you to do it on a consistent basis. And lastly, I would probably recommend a book for everyone here. It's called as the Knowing Doing Gap, which is really knowing is not enough. And again, there's a saying that someone having a great strategy but poor execution is probably worse off than someone having a mediocre strategy and great execution. Personally, I don't think that's. I think I wouldn't be satisfied with that. I think you want to have great strategy and you want to have great execution. And most organizations fail here, and there are any number of stories. So, for example, if you look at the tire manufacturers, today, most of the tire manufacturers are outside the US, and at a point in time in the 60s, most of them were actually American. So 60-70% of the tires were manufactured by American companies. Radial tires came, which is basically putting steel inside tires, and that was pioneered by Michelin. The thing is that every company knew that radial tires lasted longer than traditional rubber tires. Every organization knew it. So the challenge was not really knowledge of what requires to be done. It's really for a kind of a combination of reasons people did not act on it. And most organizations will not scale up because you may have the knowledge, but you're not committing to a plan and delivering that plan, executing that. So the action isn't really taking. So for example, you're an entrepreneur, you say, I do want to hold myself accountable. Yeah, I know I need to do it. But unless you put something and you act on it, you can't really do that. Yeah, you want to say that I want to create a network in my organization. Yeah, okay. So how do you create a network? You need to bring together people who don't normally work with each other. So what do? You need to create events by which, it could be a knowledge sharing event, it could be a social event, but you need to bring people together. And unless you act, that's not actually going to happen. Yeah, it will still remain a theory. So this book is probably slightly old, but it's kind of got great input. Might want to read, but really I want you to think of when you're trying to scale a business is there is a knowing and doing gap. Knowing is not enough. Acting is more important. Thank you. Yeah. So for me, every business will be different. Every situation will be different. But the kind of um, kind of a simple framework is, don't think of a plan for 10-year plan or a 5-year plan. If we know, like a even economic plan or whatever, don't think of it like that. Have a vision for that, but only have a plan every 3 months. So you have to look at it is, what is it that I want to achieve over the next 3 months? And then, is that aligned to my long-term goal? So sometimes, let's say you have a product. So I'll probably give a specific example. So we um, I'm trying to see if I can say it in an anonymized way. So one of the challenges I had faced is when I opened up public sector IT services for an organization, is that I was working for an offshore company, offshore-based company. And so they're kind of a very traditional model of, you have 5 people here and you have 90 people in Mumbai, Bangalore, etc. So that was the model. Yeah. And in the public sector, the expectation was that you have 95 to 98 people here and then maybe few people outside. Yeah. So it has to be, so you have to change the entire model of how you are actually delivering. So the first couple of projects were a kind of from a customer perspective was successful because it delivered, but from a company perspective, it was quite unsuccessful and it was a failure because we didn't make money. Yeah. So then the challenge was, I want to change the model in the next 3 months because I can't wait for 12 months to change it because we're kind of going to lose money. So then the question was that, we had to bring in some person, actually 2 people, who had experience of working with offshore companies delivering in the UK. So we selected 2 people, brought them in, and then did that. At a different point in time, when that business had to scale, one of the challenges we had is that every time we went and said, I am from XYZ company, the immediate question is, XYZ, who are you? Yeah. So then the thing was that over the next 6 months, we need to change that perception. They no longer should be asking who we are. Yeah. So it was important to actually invest in that kind of marketing side and building a brand. Okay. So I would say, think about what is troubling you the most, what will give you the biggest impact in the next 3 to 6 months, and that's what you do. Yeah. Okay. Because as Praveen said, the clock speed is going very fast. If you have a 5-year plan and you're thinking about something, in 5 years' time, things could be very different. Yeah. So, but don't think too short term, but think more like a 3-6 month view. But whatever you do, it should give you an impact in that kind of time frame. Yeah. So if it's a POC, then if you're on the start of a entrepreneurship journey, so the first thing is to really look at, is someone going to buy what you're offering? Yeah. So first thing is to prove whether whatever you're offering, is it valuable to someone? The second one is to say, are you going to make money out of it? Yeah. And then the third one is to say, are there enough people who are willing to buy that? Okay. So those are the 3 questions that you have to answer first before anything I've said is relevant to you.
Can we take more questions later on because
Yeah.
we're running out of sorry about that. Maybe we have networking time.
Yeah, yeah.
Just get time.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Prahlad. It is my pleasure to introduce the distinguished Managing Director of the boutique economic consulting firm EPG, Mr. Pratik Dattani. With a specialization in market entry advisory, strategic communications, and economic analysis, This individual has made significant contributions to the field of economic consulting. Until August 2017, he served as the UK Director for Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry, a prestigious industry body in India. His leadership and strategic vision have left a lasting impact on the organization. Moreover, he is the founder of the think tank Bridge India, showcasing his commitment to thought leadership and innovative ideas in the economic landscape. Beyond his role in economic consulting, he has demonstrated his commitment to social impact through various initiatives. As a board member of a healthcare business in East Africa and a member of the Global Council for Stir Education, he actively participates in endeavors that contribute to positive change. Furthermore, he has co-founded a charity advisory initiative demonstrating his dedication to philanthropy and helping high net worth individuals make more informed and impactful charitable contributions. With a background in economic consulting and FTI consulting and Deloitte in London and Abu Dhabi, he has extensive experience in public policy and international arbitration. His academic achievements include studying economics at Warwick University, where he was awarded the prize for excellence, and LMU University of Munich. His dissertation even received recognition at the International Economics Conference at Georgetown University. Apart from his professional endeavors, he has served as the chairman of the City Hindus Network, a not-for-profit membership organization showcasing his commitment to community and service and engagement. A published author and commentator, he has contributed to academic research on behavioral economics and science impact. His insights into the public policy and India have made him sought after commentator in print, TV, and online media. Additionally, he has occasionally lectured at King's College London, further sharing his wealth of knowledge with the academic community. Please join me in extending a warm welcome to this accomplished individual whose dedication to economic consulting, community service, and philanthropy has truly made a positive impact on various fronts. Rahil.
Thank you so much.
Please feel free to write on the sticky notes, and you can put it on the table for the lean coffee session.
So I don't have a presentation, but I really wish 10 years ago when I started my business, I knew Prahlad and he did a presentation just like that for me. I would have made far less mistakes. I may have made different ones, but I wouldn't have made the same ones that I did. But I want to talk a little bit about, not so much about technology and IT, but I want to talk about failure. And I want to use one of the slides that Praveen had at the beginning, which is, it said every few years the game changes. So I want to talk about how the game changed in my life, in my family's life a few times, and how that influenced how my business evolved. And I want to start with 3 very short stories about war, conflict, and natural disasters. In 1972, about 5 or 6 years after the British left most of the East African countries, East Africa's new dictator, Idi Amin, decided that he didn't like people with brown skin. So he gave all Indians a month to leave the country. Indians at the time probably owned 60 to 70% of the GDP of the country. Indians had to leave with whatever they could fill in with their suitcases, the assets they had, the shops, the inventory, the houses, etc. They left and they had to leave the country. So at that time, my dad, who was born in Uganda, he was in his 20s. He got on a ship on his own to come to Bombay to study pharmacy. The rest of the family came to the UK, but he went to India. But at that time, my dad's side of the family lost 100% of the wealth they had and 100% of the income they had. And they came here and started from zero. A few years later, in a separate part of East Africa, there was a big conflict between Christians and Muslims in Eritrea and Ethiopia. My mother-in-law was one of 6 siblings who lost most of their village, most of their family. Just one adult family member and the 6 siblings were saved. They grew up in a refugee camp on the border between Ethiopia and Uganda. Eventually, the UN dispatched all 6 siblings to 6 different countries. So as a result, I have a relative in I think, let me see if I can get all 6. Sweden, Norway, US, Canada, Uganda. My mother-in-law just went across the border to Uganda. And then one other country that I'm forgetting. Maybe there's 2 in Canada, if I remember correctly. So at that time, my mother-in-law's family lost everything they ever had. House was burnt. There was ethnic cleansing, rioting, etc. She lost both her parents. Fast forward to 2001. Oh no, in fact, sticking in the 1970s, one of the earliest and fondest memories my mum has of growing up in Gujarat is when there was the East Pakistan War. So my mum lived in Saurashtra, so close to the Pakistan border. When it was 6:20, 6:30 in the evening and the sun went down, they used to have blackout curtains, have candles in the house and eat with candles because Pakistani jets would fly over. But in the morning, now my mum is a typical Gujarati build, so she's not very tall. One of her favorite activities as a kid was to do rifle drills in the morning at school. So even the girls in the school used to be given a rifle. I'm sure she didn't really contribute to anything useful to the country, but she felt good to do these rifle drills. But that changed, at that time, a lot of her perspective about how she looked out at life. In 2001, my mom's family was still all in the same part of Gujarat, in Saurashtra. But there was an earthquake, which destroyed 100% of their wealth. The shop they had, the big Haveli they had, the old family house, that was all destroyed. Private insurance didn't exist, and government insurance took several years and was not very useful. So I've had 3 different parts of my family which have almost overnight lost 100% of their wealth and networks. So I'm quite privileged that in my generation, we haven't had those kind of issues. Brexit and pandemic, etc., is all there, but it wasn't the same as the comparable things that happened in the earlier generation's life. But that has influenced hearing some of these stories. Now I've heard a lot of these stories 20 different times because my mum forgets she's told me already 20 times and she tells me all over again. And the same with my mother-in-law. But hearing all these stories, it's influenced the way that I've done business. So I failed a lot more than I've succeeded in business because when I started my own business, I had a very high risk appetite because my perspective was, well, tomorrow I could lose everything. So what? I'll start again. So I probably had an unreasonably high risk appetite, which now that I'm older and I have responsibilities in life and kids and things like that, I would be a bit less risk happy, a bit more risk averse. But the good thing about that has meant that my entire career has been driven by me doing things that I like doing rather than thinking about, here's my vision, here's my plan, this is how I'm going to make my first 1 million and my first 100 million. I've just done stuff that's fun, and it's kind of now worked out. So I wanted to just share 2 or 3 examples like that, because I think most of us in the room are from a technology or IT background, so I wanted to share things that are not from that background. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're at the start of your career, the biggest thing I would say is whatever you think you're going to do in the next 10 years will not happen. I can give you in writing. You will pivot in your career multiple times, either out of choice or not out of choice, but you will pivot multiple times. So if you've got one very strong technical skill, you should also do some other things which are completely complementary. the main thing that we do as a business is help British and German and American companies with their market entry into India. Tends not to be technology, tends to be very much B2B. Companies have been developing the IP for several years, want to commercialize, and will help them commercialize in India. So in the middle of 2019, a battery company from Sheffield had come to us to ask us to develop a commercialization strategy. So if you buy an electric vehicle today that has a lithium-ion battery, but this is a sodium-ion battery company, and we said, forget every market in the world. India is the only one you need to worry about. So in 2019, they had 11 years of R&D and no sales. I mean, they'd had government grants and soft loans, etc., from UK government, but no commercial sales. We said, only look at India. And we organized a market visit, met CXOs of pretty much every battery company, lead-acid battery company, EV companies. A year and a half later, or a year and 3 quarters later, on a revenue of commercial sales of 0 and government grants, etc., maybe $1 million, $1.5 million a year, this 14-person startup from Sheffield was acquired by Reliance for £100 million. And that was Reliance's first investment in renewables, or in clean tech generally, after Mukesh Ambani announced they were going to spend a lot of money in this area in AGM in July 2021. So for that company, we got them through from a startup which was almost all engineers in the team, nobody who really knew how to have a conversation with somebody who wasn't an engineer. So a marketing conversation, sales conversation, talking to somebody who wasn't British, talking to somebody outside the UK. So we managed that. So partly that role was understanding the Indian market, partly it was coaching, partly it was if the team has questions on a Sunday night, I'm available on WhatsApp. So a lot of the remit for the work was fairly broad. In the next few weeks, we're about to start, so this is a very, very different project. In the next few weeks, we're about to start a fundraising campaign from some leading philanthropists for a big center in Oxford University. So Oxford has 3 religious studies centers. One is the Center for Hebrew and Hebrew and Israeli studies, so Hebrew and Jewish studies, sorry, which has been around for a long time and gets several tens of millions of donations every year. Then there's an Oxford Center for Islamic Studies, which likewise does quite well. And the youngest of the 3 centers is the Oxford Center for Hindu Studies, which is 16 years old and is very poorly funded compared to the other 2. But over the next 5 years, we're leading a 45 million fundraise. Some of that will come from different governments in India, hopefully, and some of that will come from philanthropists. So Ajay Piramal, for example, has been or will be a huge supporter over the next few years. What's the same about both those projects, a battery company as well as an Oxford academic center, is building networks in India, connecting like-minded people together and being able to tell a story. What we do well is I'm completely de-skilled from my days at Deloitte, where my job was to do PowerPoints and analyze lots of data and put it on PowerPoints and convince the client I knew more than them when it really wasn't true. But my manager told me I knew more than them, so I said that. So I'm almost entirely de-skilled from a lot of that technical knowledge. But what we do quite well as a company is we tell stories really well. Pitching to a major philanthropist is much more about the story than it is about any technical information about whether Oxford will produce X many PhDs studying a particular aspect of Sanskrit or produce X many master's students. Just this afternoon, 2 hours before coming here, I came back from Bangalore, where I spent a few days with one of the top IB schools, international baccalaureate schools in the UK, that's looking to set up a franchise in India. There as well, a lot of the connections we made in India, so we were talking mainly to real estate developers in different cities in Bangalore, Delhi, elsewhere. It was about telling a story. your business would be enhanced by having a globally recognized brand because X. Once they buy the story, then somebody can do the Excel model and figure out the financials and figure out what upside and downside risks there are. And that's what our business has been mainly about. The research is based on building networks, convincing people, telling these stories. And my one kind of advice, I think, to everyone in the room would be, especially if you are from more of a technical background, as you grow your business and as you scale your business, actually some of those technical skills, if you're running the company, become less and less important over time, because sales and marketing become more important, managing people, motivating people, coaching people become far more important, and you're not going to do the coding as much. As a result of this, I've done some purely by serendipity, not because of design. I've also, during the course of my business, managed to work with lots of political leaders, both in the UK and India. When I ran the UK office for FICCI, Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry, at the time from 2014 to 2017, more or less once a month, there was a minister from the center that used to visit. Mamata Banerjee once, on a state visit, came with a delegation of 95 people, which was the second worst experience of my professional life. I won't tell you the first. Maybe after a few drinks, I'll tell you the first. It was the second worst because it was a great delegation. It was actually really well planned, and she knew what she was doing. But we had booked the National History Museum for a big cultural show. And the invites went out from my name with my mobile number. 450 people were invited. We had smoke machines and we had huge stage and big sound system, etc. And then the then president of India, Abdul Kalam, passed away the night before. So the MEA had issued an advisory to say you cannot sing, you cannot do, they said something like you cannot do happy songs or something like that. And then there was a lot of conversation, and in the end, we just decided to cancel, but it was canceled with 3 business hours notice. In India, if you do that, that's okay. Here, if you do that, it's not okay. So, and then the very next day, there were big floods in Bengal. So she actually left halfway through her visit. And again, there were 3 or 4 things in the itinerary that were organized. But I've organized some things at Number 10, partly organized something at Buckingham Palace before, done market openings at the London Stock Exchange at least 4 or 5 times with different masala bonds from India, where Piyush Goyal has come and pressed the button for market opening. And all of these things have been possible partly because I've had a very high risk appetite, and I've just thought it's fun, let's just do it and see what happens. And partly because I'm not focused so much on the technical aspects of my career, much more on the softer aspects. It means that probably I'll have a problem in 5 or 10 years' time because I won't know anything about anything anymore. But until then, I think I'm good. So I just wanted to offer you guys a different perspective today, just to get you thinking. If you want to talk about the government affairs, public affairs side of what we do, happy to chat later. I think in the last 9 years, we've worked with about 8 or 9 political parties from India on paid engagements, sitting in London, which is quite unusual because in India today, you can't work for different sides of the political spectrum at the same time because people don't like it. But somehow we've managed. So thank you very much.
I have a question. So as you deal with these varying cultures, background, team cultures, in between India and UK, how much of cultural orientation do you think is important for someone working here, starting their careers here, or being here? How much of Britain should they know? Would it help? And how much of that cultural exchange is basic knowledge? Chances are, whichever country you go, will probably work with an Indian or someone from Indian origin.
Yeah.
How much of understanding that do you think, based on quality and practice, is a fact, or just like business and humor can get through anyway? Does it really matter?
Yeah, so I think when I started my career, I was surprised how much it mattered, because I started off in consulting at Deloitte. There were 160 of us that joined together on the graduate scheme. And we were, first 8 weeks was training. So we were in hotels in different countries, partly in London and elsewhere. And at the end of the 8 weeks, it was really, really clear that there were about 100 British guys and about 50 foreigners. And all the foreigners hung out together all the time. And the Brits hung out together all the time. And the single biggest determinant was the Brits liked drinking, and the rest of us didn't drink that much. And so we automatically just didn't stay up until 4 o'clock every morning drinking, and then turn up to training at 8 o'clock in the morning. So I think there I did see the cultures were sometimes different. I think any market you go to, you should try and overcompensate for learning more about the culture of either the company or the team or the country, because it can't hurt. And there'll always be some moments like talking about a TV show, or talking about kids, or talking about any cultural references that are difficult to pick up unless you've kind of immersed yourself in the culture.
Now UK government actually almost 6 lakh students are intake. But if you look at the job market, in my city, and your stat, that we have 120 people from my, but actually only 5 people have got the job. And even in that batch, we have a combination of yes, mechanical, technical, financial, everything is combined. Is that the problem in here? Education is the problem? Structural of subjects, or in the markets we are lacking of which, or else in the real problem is the companies who are not ready markets. They want a ready products to pay off, or else they want to invest in the new product. Like we are, I am actually a skillful worker. I can probably say because I have a technical knowledge. I have a technical knowledge with the mechanical, as well as now I have older master in engineering management, which I have a combination of. As you said, I want to take that as well. Now in the 10 period, we don't know what we are. We are actually looking for what we are. In this period, how can we direct our into the same product? How can we project our product to the company? We are this product, sell. How can we sell us to the company? That's how
So we're still a small company. So from our perspective, I'd leave it to larger companies to talk about why they don't recruit as many people as they do in the UK. And even harder, I hope. And it's okay. He'll get it approved by his comms team afterwards.
We are live on social media now.
I think there's 3 or 4 answers to that question. So one is a perspective from larger corporates, which I can't comment on. One is, I think the British economy's economic growth rate has generally been much lower. It's been hit much more in terms of cost of living crisis compared to lots of parts of Europe and the US as well. So I think generally on a macro level, there's less opportunities available. I think there's a policy element to it as well, which is that 3 years ago, the British government, the same British government, with more or less the same set of people in the cabinet, decided to completely make it easy for everybody to come from outside. And now the government is saying, well, forget our own policy, which we invented. We are going to do a complete change to that policy. So probably in the first instance, that policy of being extremely lax was wrong. Equally, right now, the policy of completely tightening the access to the job market for new entrants is wrong. The answer was somewhere in the middle. But that decision was political. This decision is political. So I think there is there's a macro issue, there's a policy issue, but then more relevantly at a micro level for you, I think if you are competing against lots of people who have, so I don't know much about your courses in particular, so I'll speak more abstractly. If you're competing against people who have 2 or 3 internships or 2 or 3 other work experiences, what I find is that American and British students, as well as Israelis and Germans who are, Israelis and Germans that tend to be older when they graduate. Americans and Brits tend to have done a lot more work experience that's relevant. So if you're an international student coming in, whether from India or anywhere else, it's more difficult to compete against that. So the academics, fine, you compete perfectly okay. But the non-academic extracurricular work, if you come from, let's say, the top private school in India, and you did horse riding there, and you did golf, etc., fine. So you know all those things already. But if you came from any other schooling background where there was more of a focus on being a topper and getting the academics right, then all that stuff, after a point, whether you got 80% or 99.9%, doesn't matter at all in the job market here anymore. And that, I think, a lot of graduates that come here from India, that realization only happens 2-3 years later. By that time, maybe it's too late because you've already invested that effort and that money. Part of the problem, in my opinion, is the way agents in India sell education opportunities here. So in normal kind of business, if somebody is only motivated by commission, if you ask them a question, the answer is always yes. It's not no, because then they don't get any money. So I think a lot of the way agents sell UK and Canada and Australia education opportunities is not fit for purpose in India. But anyway, so in your particular instance, I don't know if I gave you what you were looking for, but there are probably 5 or 6 different determinants of this, generally speaking, for Indian students in the UK. What's that? Oh. I get up at 5 a.m., but not to do any work. I get up to feed my daughter.
Thanks to your daughter. I think we've all been part of that club at some point.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Lean coffee session by Prahlad. Thank you, Pratik. We'll have lean coffee session by Prahlad Koti. So, any questions directed to Prahlad, please?
I think if you have all the questions in hand, I will bunch them up and we will try and ask.
Fly on the wall when Mamata Banerjee thing happened. That must have been something.
Yeah, she's a lot of fun.
ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ಬಂತಾ?
We will have Q&A, and then they can write the thing. We can take it as a final agenda.
Okay.
We'll collect it.
Okay.
What we'll do is we'll have a Q&A for all the 3. Maybe Praveen needs to leave. 5 minutes, okay. So we'll have a Q&A. Share your ideas, and then questions we'll take it, and maybe we can work out during the coffee, like anything urgent and important we'll address in the next session.
ಎಲ್ರಿಗೂ ಸರಿ ಬಂತಾ ಇಂಟ್ರೊಡಕ್ಷನ್? ಸಿಗ್ತಾನೆ ಇಲ್ಲ ಇನ್ನು ಕ್ಲೋಸಿಂಗ್ ಸ್ಟೇಟ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಇದೆ. ಸಾರಿ.
Tables break.
question is kind of related to the question that person asked, which is a lot of young people come into the job market without really ready for it, right? We are being the education that we are taught or the schools that we go to, we don't really address how do you get a job and how do you succeed in a job. 90% of what we taught in school is probably not useful in those software skill perspective, right? Because how to get a job, how to get promoted, how to work, these things are not actually taught. So, with your experience, could you address how a person who has no work experience, fresh out of college, right? They come out fresh out of college and then find that, oh, actually, I did not have the things that I should have done 5 years ago or 3 years ago. So, what could they do around 2-3 years before they finish college that will make them ready for a job market? That's my question.
ಗಣ ಐ ಥಿಂಕ್ ಅದು ಆನ್ ಆಗಿಲ್ಲ. ಆನ್ ಆಗಿದೆ.
So I would say do as many varied internships and experiences as possible. Don't focus on technical skills and try and build networks as well. Because I think once you are established in your career, you automatically have the networks. But at the beginning, maybe you don't. The more
Can we reduce the volume, please?
the more you meet different types of people in different networks, the more a young person will be able to assess maybe what they want to do or maybe what they don't want to do. That's sometimes as important as knowing, figuring out what you want to do. So I think those networks and doing internships is important, even if they're unpaid internships.
There's a question here.
You don't take that question?
There's a question here that I'll pose to Praveen. The question is how to market your business.
Can I know who the question is from? The question was how to market your business. The person still here? Okay, so I'll address that in general. Was it your question? Okay. So I wanted to get some background on that question, but let me take that the way it's phrased, right? So, I mean, the way you market anything, right? So is firstly to understand what's really needed in the market. So and it's partly addressing the previous question as well. The answer will bleed between the two. And the thing is, you really need to understand what's the market really looking for and see what aspects of that are you addressing as a solution, right? So there's a famous framework by Clayton Christensen. It's coincidentally about disruptive innovation. It's about jobs to be done. So people don't buy a product, people don't buy a service, people don't engage a company for no reason, right? So they're not looking to work with, say, Jaguar Land Rover, or they're not looking to buy a Jaguar Land Rover for just the fact that it is Jaguar Land Rover. It means something to them because they have a job to be done. One is going from point A to point B, but they want to do it in style. They want to do it with a certain reliability. So that is why they might go for a Jaguar Land Rover, right? So understanding if Jaguar Land Rover, JLR, is trying to market themselves to someone, they have to tick certain boxes. They have to tick certain boxes in terms of affordability, the commercial aspect, the practical aspect, right? The left brain, so-called left brain aspect. Then there's the other side of it as well, right? So there is a certain emotional box that you need to tick as well. So, but overall, you need to look at what is the market really looking for, and how, in what aspects am I, as an individual, as a business, as a service, addressing those needs. And if you're not addressing that, you need to make sure that you reorient yourself, right? And that's the answer to the previous question as well. If you're thinking of the old job market where there were jobs to be had, there were like tens of thousands of jobs on an annual basis for commodity skills, right? So if you're looking to just go out there in the market and it'll get picked up, that's no longer going to happen. And increasingly so, regardless of what IT services companies might do. I'm not speaking for my employer, but just generally talking about trends, right? You have to be an individual. You have to be a unique individual, and that's how you market your business as well. So that's the reason the answers are very similar. So you need to think about how do you distinguish us? How can you make sure that you're not, I mean, no one is a commodity, right? When you think of yourself as a commodity is when this problem starts about why isn't the market ready for me? Why can't I find a job? So the approach you're taking, for example, about what do people start doing 2 to 3 years before they get into the job market is exactly the right approach. I've had this conversation with people who get out of the armed forces they come out of the armed forces, which is out of the bosom of the armed forces, which is like a family, right? And they come out into the wider world, and they feel that they're not equipped for that wider world. After that, the post army, the short service commission, or long service commission, or whatever it is. And the conversation that I've always had with them is they have excellent skills, very, very transferable skills, and some really impressive experiences that are unparalleled anywhere in the corporate world. The reason they're not able to market them, they're not really able to find their feet immediately. I mean, most of them do, and most of them thrive after a while, but the initial adjustment is quite traumatic for many of them. And what I've always told people who have been in that situation, and in my cohort in B school, there were quite a few people who came from the armed services background. It's always that you need to think about your 5-year horizon, your 10-year horizon. What will life be like you? What will you be going through at that point in time? If you're in a short service commission, if you're in an engineering course, don't think of your graduation as 2025 and then you'll be in the job market. You are in the job market today, you just don't know it yet, right? So prepare yourself to not be a commodity, and make sure that you know how are you going to differentiate yourself from every other offering that is out there in the world. So it's a very similar answer, whether it's an individual or a business.
I'll probably add just one other thing, which is probably not a very specific thing, but I would say if it's a business and you want to market it, you should be in forums or networks where your buyer is, where your buyers are present, and ask them questions and listen to them. And that's probably an understated thing, which is asking questions, because really that will give you a better indication of how well your product fits or doesn't fit. But it's really to put yourself in that position where people who are likely to use your product or service, they are present. Be present with them. Okay. Pratik, question for you very specifically. What skills or courses would you recommend for someone who wants to come out of tech? And it's kind of into the real world, especially mid-career.
I wouldn't recommend any courses actually. I would say much more just build your network, attend more networking things, meet people who are completely different to you. So maybe doing corporate affairs, maybe doing, maybe working as parliamentary assistants, maybe working in marketing, maybe doing sales. Just meet different kinds of people and then see where your current skill set is transferable. Because there'll be some things that you naturally do not want to do, and some types of people you may not get on with it as well, because let's say a marketing personality is different from a tech personality. But if you meet those kind of people, you know what works and what doesn't work as well. But don't waste money on more courses.
I was actually going to ask this question to any audience member who has done this, moved away from tech to non-tech or non-tech to tech. If anyone has done the transition, do you want to offer an opinion?
I won't say moved away from tech. I won't say I moved away from tech, but I moved from tech into management, and now from management to sales. So, but all within technology.
I think there was a hand.
Yeah, somebody was there. Yeah. Share it.
Hello, first of all, thank you for this beautiful session, for holding this beautiful session. And I am from a filmmaking background. I've done my master's in filmmaking. My name is Zubin, by the way. And I've done my master's in filmmaking, and I worked in the industry as a music producer, music director, etc., etc. And now, after working 4 or 5 years in the industry, I'm here in the UK doing my MSc in computer science at University of Birmingham. I know that was very unexpected, that last line. But yeah, I think this whole session definitely resonated with me, because the whole point of keeping up with trends, keeping up with what the world is going towards is very important. And of course, I have done a lot in tech, but audio related. So I was there, but now I want to be properly there. So I think keeping up with the world is really important. And I'm lucky to have had very good links and kept weak links away from my life, as Mr. Praveen mentioned earlier.
It's good to have weak links.
No, but those kind of weak links is, I hope you all understood what kind of weak links I'm talking. Yeah, yeah, negative links. Yeah, I'm glad that I've had certain positive influences in my life, and one such session is today. It has strengthened my belief that probably this is where things can probably happen. And looking at you, it gives me a little courage. um, that transferable skills definitely matter, and you can have coding skills and all of that. Even ChatGPT can do it really well nowadays. But what really misses out is the human factor, the empathy, sympathy, understanding. All of these are really important, is what I've come to understand in these 4 months that I've been here. I have only joined in September and hoping to go very long. So yeah, that is my experience so far, and I'm just looking forward to having a really good and enriching networking through KannadigaruUK. Thank you so much.
One last question here. I think it's from Hari. How to fail safe in startup?
Don't use your own money. Use other people's money. It's VCs expect you to burn cash, so it's fine. If it's your money or your family's money, then do it safely. But you probably have more useful things to say.
I mean, assuming it's his money, so I think the perspective I would take is, I mean, it's like Pratik earlier said, it's kind of it depends on personal risk appetite. Some people are willing to throw everything away and then focus on their passion. Other people may not, or the circumstances may not allow them. Yeah. So my general advice would be to start small, prove it, and make sure that you are on a sound footing. It's not a full answer, as in there's no we think that all some decisions are risk free. It's not quite like that. Every decision has its own pros and cons. Um, sometimes it pays off, sometimes it doesn't. So everything has a price that you have to pay. So if you do it in a slightly safer way, it means that the growth you can expect, it will be initially slower, yeah, or you might not be able to dedicate as much time towards your passion. So I don't think there's a kind of a easy answer, to be honest. It depends on your personal risk appetite, and just remember that every decision has a price that you pay. Yeah.
Does anyone want to share any experience? We got like maybe 4-5 minutes before we break for.
Yeah.
As we know, so the question is basically, how do you put this the gap, the skills gap? Because I know a lot of students who are struggling in the market to get job after you be post of graduate. Graduate course, at least they get a job for the graduate. But most of Indian students come here to their masters, USC, post like